Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host, here on this Thursday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday, and a big shout out to everybody also listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. And make sure you tell your friends, and tell your enemies if you want, your neighbors, anybody interested in agriculture. Tell them about this show. More the merrier. And the audience continues to grow here at RealAg Radio and with RealAgriculture.com. It's Thursday, which means it is the Farmer Rapid Fire, and it's brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. For more than 90 years, Pioneer has developed and tested products to meet your local challenges. With new Optimum Glide canola, Enlist E3 soybeans, to performing corn products and industry-leading traits and technologies to maximize your yield potential, Pioneer's on-the-ground team can help you get the right products for your fields. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more. Big thanks to Pioneer Seeds Canada for being the sponsor of the Farmer Rapid Fire. This allows us to travel across the country and talk to farmers really in a lot of different geographies and find out how they're making out on their farms, right? And today we got a great list. We're going to talk to Ethan Wallace, who is in Seaforth, Ontario. Talk to Philip Shaw, who's down in the depths of Dresden. Looking forward to hearing from Phil. We haven't had Phil on for a while. Jason Kehler is in Carman, Manitoba, which has been quite dry. So I'm interested in getting the update there from Jason. We got Jesse Meyer, who I know. He's up in Woking, which is up in the Peace. And I ran into him at Ag in Motion. And, hey, Jesse, how are the crops? He had this big smile on his face. So I think we're going to hear some good news out of Jesse here today. So he is up in the Peace Country. And then we're going to finish up with Paul Hermans. And Paul is a field agronomist with Pioneer Seeds Canada. He is based in Richmond, Ontario, which is just outside of Ottawa. Now, you can participate in the program by sending us your feedback, your thoughts, your concerns, your minor grievances, or maybe they're big, big problems. You can send an email to shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also send us, you can actually call the RealAg listener line, 855-776-6147. You can also find us across all the different social media channels as well. Hey, make sure you subscribe to our newsletters. They're great. They're free, and I know you love free. So realagriculture.com/subscribe. Okay, so what I have here is Farmer Rapid Fire. So what I thought I would do in our last Real Agri Studies Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index survey, which we talked about yesterday on the show with Justin Funk. So if you missed that, go back and listen to the podcast. We talked about some of the concerns that farmers had. So what I thought, because today is all about feedback, right? It's the Farmer Rapid Fire. I thought I would read some of the open-ended answers that we got from farmers. So here's some things that people said. Ag business has changed a lot from a year ago. High input cost, high interest rates, lower commodity prices. Another says, ag has had many good years. Interest rates are a concern and big increases in equipment costs. And crop inputs are a huge issue if grain prices continue to recede. Ag in Canada, another person said, ag in Canada is up and down with fuel prices and fertilizer pricing. Seed is up because of two items. Bring pricing more in line so the farmer knows where they are. Also, somebody said, all good. Well, that's being positive. Also, biggest threat to agriculture is the climate movement. Many dollars will be spent by government on incentives that are bad business. Good farmers are good for the environment, and good environmental practices make you money. So there's just a little bit of a taste of the open-ended questions or open-ended comments, and we'll get to more of those as the weeks goes on. Let's take a break. We'll get off and run with Farmer Rapid Fire right after this.
Registration is now open for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference coming August 15th to 17th to Calgary, Alberta, brought to you by McDonald's. Spend time networking on the trade show floor, hear from keynote speakers, and take in breakout sessions designed to increase profit, manage your rangeland, and navigate trends. Get up close to advanced techniques and hands-on demos and experience bullfighting at the closing party. Proud, innovative, and loyal, we are beef. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit CanolaSchool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Introducing the Arion 600 Series tractor by Claas, where versatility meets productivity head-on, because you've got jobs to do. Mowing, tedding, raking, baling, loading, filling, tilling, cleaning, spreading, hauling, feeding. This is multi-purpose reimagined to do the work for you. It's more than just power. The Arion 600 tractor gets it done.
And welcome back to the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. Make sure you go to pioneer.com/Canada to find out more. We take the Farmer Rapid Fire to Seaforth, Ontario. We're talking to Ethan Wallace. Ethan, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Shaun?
Hey, pretty good. Hey, what's happened on the farm this week?
We finally got our straw off and our cover crop in, and just waiting on some manure to go out on it now. Hopefully we'll have a good amount of feed this fall from it.
Okay. Now, have you been getting ample amount of moisture?
Yes.
That's putting it lightly?
We begged for rain for a month and a half, and now it won't stop. So it's been it was an interesting wheat harvest, to say the least. Yeah,
how are those yields, though?
Ours was pretty good. We were our best yield ever, so that's good for us. Not quite what some of the neighbors were getting, but our wheat went in late last year, so I think if we can get it in the ground a week or two ahead of when we have been, we can probably build on that yield for next year.
Okay, that kind of was the difference. Is that seeding date?
Yeah, I think planting date has a lot to do with what's holding it back. It looked really good from the time it came out of the ground. And I think just that extra couple of weeks in the fall to build root mass before going into the winter could have made all the difference. So we'll try and get it in a bit earlier next year and see how it goes.
How about the corn?
Corn looks fantastic. We're probably a week behind. When it started raining, we lost all the heat and sunshine, so it's running a little behind, but it looks fantastic. Like it's a beautiful crop of corn out there. Beans are really good where they don't have wet feet, and where they have wet feet, they're really bad. So,
and we're kind of into that August time frame where we need some rain on those soybeans, but we don't need too much rain on those soybeans.
Yeah, we need the moisture for pod fill, but not so much that they're swimming. So I've got probably 4 acres out of the 100 we have that are currently swimming, waterlogged soil. So it won't be the end of the world, but it'd be nice to get a little less and get it a bit of a stretch between rains instead of every other day, like maybe once a week.
Yeah. So as you look at some of the realities of 2023, how is it stacking up against maybe the budget or the plans you put together at the beginning of the year?
I think like I said, we had our best ever wheat yield. So that certainly helped. That made the budget. If the corn and beans come off the way they're looking, they're going to be above average. So that will certainly help as well. We've marketed most of the crop already, so I was able to take advantage of some of those highs and lock that in. So it's going to be it should be a good year, barring a catastrophe. But it'll definitely help set things up for next year. And we've seen some of the fertilizer prices slide back a little bit, which is good. So
yeah, it's interesting. We did our July intake of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, and we leave an opportunity for farmers to leave open-ended responses. And I'll tell you, the one thing that comes up a lot is fertilizer, and I think that really has been an overhang for a lot of farmers, quantitatively and qualitatively, just in the overall perception of what the future looks like. And the more that price can go down, I think the more positivity we're going to see out there in farm country.
Absolutely. And then we've been with Joanna's chemical company job, we've been trying some of the biologicals on farm too, just to see whether we can reduce the nitrogen usage a bit, but still get it from other sources. So seeing if that can help with costs. And fertilizer, we need it, right? You can't grow a crop without it. So we need it to be in a price range that allows us to be profitable. And I think we're starting to see them fall back to more reasonable levels. They're certainly not back to 2 year ago or 3 year ago levels, but they are down significantly from the highs during the tariff issue. So
what's something that hasn't worked out like maybe you had planned for this year so far?
We bought a piece of equipment a couple of years ago, and I've been slowly rebuilding it, and we're going through growing pains and learning curve on it. It didn't work just the way I had hoped, so I've got a bit more research and a bit more fine tuning to do on it.
What's that piece?
We bought a used 1860 no-till drill and air cart, and just trying to get the computer system and everything running on it properly. And we tried to do it cost effectively, so it was an older piece that had been used a lot by someone else, and so we're just working through that right now. And once we get it running, that'll help us move across the ground a little quicker and let me spend more time in the barn where most of our income comes from. So
yeah, how have things been going with the dairy?
Cows are milking well. We put up some good feed last fall, and the cattle are doing really well in the barn. We've seen, we're in a profitable industry, so that helps. But yeah, them milking really well is quite helpful as well.
In last month, RealAgriculture studies asked farmers about consolidation. And a resounding amount, like 90% of farmers said they were concerned about consolidation negatively impacting them. If I asked you that question, how would you respond and why?
Consolidation is always a concern because it takes away some of the ability to shop around. Or, in the dairy industry, we've seen some of the bigger players buy up smaller plants for their market and then close those plants. And what we haven't seen is them add processing capacity to their existing plants. So what's happening is, due to the consolidation, we're actually losing some processing capacity. And at least in the P5 Ontario East, we're at our limit on processing. We need more processing to be able to get our product to market. So when the big players buy up small and medium-sized players and just shut them down because to gain their market without adding that processing capacity back to their existing plants or somewhere else, it has an effect on our ability to get our products to market. And we see that in other industries too. With what's happened with Olymel in Quebec and losing that processing capacity for hogs, that's driving a lot of hogs out of country now, which could be processed here. But when that consolidation happens and you lose some of that processing capacity, it can have cascade effects throughout any industry.
And hard to find replacement, right? It's just it's hard to add that capacity back.
No, it is absolutely. I mean, between government regulations, costs, and I mean within the animal industries, animal activists, it's very difficult to get somebody willing to take on that amount of risk and debt and to build a new plant. So it's concerning for Ontario and Canada. I mean, we need to be able to process our products here. We've been very good throughout history at sending raw product somewhere else to get manufactured. We really need those jobs, and we need that GDP, that income driver back here within Ontario and within the country. So
yeah, for sure.
It'd be nice to see some, whether it be processing capacity or even further manufacturing for ag products back in Ontario, and then keep that value added money at home rather than sending it somewhere else.
Yeah, really good points, Ethan. Hey, all the best to you with corn and bean harvest, and keep those cows milking. We'll chat with you a little bit later on in the season, okay?
Perfect. Thanks, Shaun.
Great stuff. That is Ethan Wallace out of Seaforth, Ontario. We're going to continue with the Farmer Rapid Fire. When we come back, you're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Pioneer Seeds Canada.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
And welcome back to the Farmer Rapid Fire here on RealAg Radio, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. Make sure you go to pioneer.com/Canada to find out more. Well, we'll stay in Ontario, and now we're in Dresden, and we're talking to Phil Shaw. Hey, Phil, how are you doing?
I am okay, Shaun. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How do the crops look, though?
Well, it's wet. I don't know what your other guys are telling you in Ontario and Quebec, but it's been wet. And generally speaking, crops don't like wet feet. However, it looks like Ontario's in for possibly a record corn crop, regardless of how wet it's been. We started off this year very dry, and in fact, when it's very dry, you can get almost anything done you want to get done. And many of us were worried about crops getting enough moisture, like in early June. And then about the 1st of July, it started raining, and it's hardly stopped. You get rain, seems every other day, and had a lot of damage in my particular area in soybeans from just being too wet. And that continues. Like, for instance, wheat harvest, it's over with here. And there was a lot of problems, quality problems with wheat, with sprouting and mildew and things like that. That's not everywhere in Ontario, but it certainly was down here in the Dresden area. And if I was to characterize things, it's been too wet. And, we spend millions of dollars in Ontario under draining fields. And the drainage systems have certainly been well worth it this year. But even though it's been too wet, and we're spraying corn with fungicide to keep the disease out of it, it is looking Ontario-wide that the crop is going to be very, very good. And there'll be some areas that have been hurt by water. My area might be one of them, even though I'm expecting a lot better crops than last year because it was a little bit too dry.
Yeah, and of course,
I would
those soybeans want the August moisture, but only so much August moisture. Like, that August moisture drives the yield, right? But there comes a point where it's like, slow down a little bit here.
Yeah, we've got it. We've got enough moisture to take us right into September, at least in my area. And I know you've probably been looking at Quebec where they've got way too much moisture.
Yes.
And so July was wet, and it's still wet. And you're right. Soybeans always like rain in August, but I always say soybeans like it slightly dry, so they like timely rains. And I know there's some guys that are very concerned north of here about disease in soybeans, right? White mold and different things of that. No, I don't seem to have that issue, hardly ever, but there's a lot of people in Ontario that do. But this is the year for disease, like in Ontario, with whether it's corn with tar spot or all the plethora of other diseases corn can get, because it's been wide open spraying for fungicide in many fields across Ontario over the last couple of weeks to help with that. And I'm sure there's some people doing that with soybeans as well. But if it didn't rain the rest of August, I'd be very pleased with that, because there's a lot of field work with 1.3 million acres of wheat, a record wheat crop being taken off in Ontario. A lot of cover crops need to be planted, and a lot of that ground, people choose not to do that to prepare it for next year. And for a lot of it right now, it's just too wet to do that. So we'll need it to dry out a little bit.
Yeah, you're like this, that drainage tile. It just pays for itself so fast. Yeah,
it's huge.
Do you have non-tiled ground?
No, I don't have it. That just doesn't work here. I mean, it's you have to have it drained, or you can't be profitable, and it's just not sustainable. And so no. And there's a lot of that goes on in the summer, but we just need it drier, and that'll certainly happen. The fickle nature of what we do with weather, you know how it is, especially coming from Western Canada, where you see all kinds of things going on in a weather year. And I know it's been dry out your way.
Yeah, we could use some of that moisture, Phil. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I know the guys in Quebec feel the same way. Like, they've had a terrible time with how much moisture they've got. Some of them are calling it a monsoon down there.
Yeah, I keep on hearing that. I have heard a lot about that. It's been just brutal that way. So it's in some ways, I hate to broad brush it here, but Southwestern Ontario really seems to be the sweet spot again in Canada.
Well, it could be, but even though it's been wet, as I told you, I'm kind of expecting a record crop for corn in Ontario. It goes from Windsor to the Quebec border, and generally speaking, corn can take a lot of rain when it's tall. And so we're probably looking at that, a very high yield on corn coming out of Ontario, as long as we get the rest of the way good. And soybeans, they won't be far behind, but they tend to be a little bit more fickle in nature, and so it's hard to tell what they'll do. Yeah. Mine are better than last year, but generally speaking, in Ontario, corn at least will be one of the top crops ever, in my opinion.
Yeah. So have you figured out how you're going to market all that 23 crop corn then? Have you got all the answers?
No, I don't have any answers. The bottom line is nobody knows. It certainly looks in retrospect, last year and last winter and last June 21st is the time that maybe we should have marketed some of that new crop corn, but nobody knows the future. Certainly it looks pretty tough now with the way the crop is in the United States. Lots of corn in the United States, lots of corn in Brazil, and there's an awful lot of corn, old crop corn and new crop corn coming in Ontario and Quebec.
Yeah.
So what does that say? It's just one of those things, we've been down this trail before, and here we are.
I think the question, though, a lot of commodity analysts are looking at, though, Phil, is there demand for all that corn?
Well, yeah, I'll leave it to those erstwhile global commodity analysts to worry about that. That certainly is an issue. Our Brazilian friends are going to be starting to export more corn than our American friends, but I tend to worry a little bit more about the demand for corn in Ontario and Quebec, where we ship out a lot of corn to Europe. I hope that's there, but generally speaking, over the last year, and certainly it looks like this year, we're going to have a lot more corn than we have uses for. I'd love to see more domestic demand for corn in Ontario. We already take about 35% of it for Ontario ethanol. The ethanol plants in Quebec as well. But you're right. You're definitely right. Demand's an issue. especially when you got a supply that's coming on like this. Now, the story's not over yet because we don't know what's going to happen from here on in. But yes, you're right. I mean, we could always use more demand. And certainly for Ontario and Quebec corn, we need that to be robust. Problem is, when you start shipping it out on the high seas, the great equalizer is cheap, 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 and nobody likes to go there.
Oh, that's right. Not those discounts suck. Okay, hey, wanted to ask you, when you look at your budget for this year and how things are working out, and of course we still got to get it off the field, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. What's worked out really well, and what's been a kind of a disappointment?
For crops growing this year, or
just your general running your farm.
What has worked out? I've been complaining about too wet of weather, but the dry weather in the spring at least gave us opportunity to get things planted early. And yes, I've been complaining about wet weather since July. That's created all kinds of management challenges. Like last year it was so dry I didn't spray corn. This year it's been so wet I made sure I did. Plus the corn looks a lot better. So, generally speaking, even though I'm complaining about the abundance of moisture this year, it is better than what happened to me last year where I didn't have enough. And I had bad results for both corn and soybeans. So, maybe some of that is science and genetics. I don't know. Some of it is the luck of the weather. And getting that drier spring helps us here in Eastern Canada and Ontario and Quebec to get the crop in the ground. And then it would be nice to have timely rain after that, but it's just been a little bit more than usual. So I don't know if that answers your question because, I think generally speaking, we'll have more bushels per acre this year in Ontario and Quebec. Now our prices are down. So how that is reflecting on the revenue per acre, it's hard to tell. For people that didn't have as good a crops last year, they sold for higher prices than they are likely to this year. But it's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell now. But generally speaking, as I told you earlier, I'm expecting a record crop in Ontario of corn. Not so sure of soybeans, but they should be pretty good too. But I am expecting a big crop of corn in Ontario, right from Windsor to the Quebec border.
Phil, thanks so much for providing perspective on your farm as well as a broader region as well. Really appreciate it. All the best to you during harvest, okay?
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate the wonderful work you do and gives us a great synopsis of agriculture in this country.
Hey, really appreciate it. We try our best. It is Phil Shaw out of Dresden, Ontario. We'll be right back with more of the Farmer Rapid Fire. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. It's now time for a product spotlight with Koch Agronomic Services, and right now we're joined by Tom Barry, based out of Saskatchewan. What is the high cost of some low-rate stabilizers?
Well, not all nitrogen stabilizers have the same or even comparable rates of active ingredients in them. And so our products in particular, if you compare Super U on the market, Super U has over 9,000 parts per million of active ingredient. That's broken apart between 8,500 parts per million of dicyandiamide and then over 600 parts per million of NBPT, which is agritine. So, those rates, when we compare that to the market, there's a lot of products on the market right now that don't even have, 1,500 parts per million of combined. And that would be on the high side, Sean. The highest products barely have 1,500 parts per million of total.
That's a significant difference for sure. DefendYourN.ca, right? Also, they could talk to their local retailer?
Yeah.
Hey, great stuff. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio for the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. We now go to Carman, Manitoba. We're talking to Jason Kehler. Hey, Jason, how's it going?
Good, Sean. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Okay, so how are those crops looking in Carman?
Well, Sean, I think for the amount of moisture we've had, our crops look amazing. Obviously, there's some weak spots, but we've had very little rain this summer. I think everything is holding on really well.
Yeah. Okay. So give us some, because everybody has a different context of dry, like no matter where you're farming, right? So give us some context there. How dry has it been in Carman? Because this has been a thing all season.
Yes, it has. We don't farm in the Power System Triangle, obviously, but we have had roughly 2.2 inches of rain since snow melt. So for us, that is very dry.
That's dry.
We're used to, yes, we're used to, 10 to 15 inches of rain a year. And we've had basically nothing. So our potatoes are all irrigated, so they're looking good. Some of our corn is irrigated, so that's fine too. Actually, even all of our dryland corn looks good. Canola looks reasonable. Our wheat is weak. Our wheat probably took it on the chin the most. Beans are a little bit weak also, but for 2 inches of rain, I think everything looks pretty good.
Yeah. So now, is this a case where last year's heavy spring moisture, are we still carrying forward some of these moisture reserves, or what's been the story?
Not so much. I would say 21 was a very dry year for us also, where we had a lot of rain in the fall of 20. So 21 turned out really not that bad for us. We're in a little bit of a deficit situation that way. We had it, obviously, yes, I talked to you last spring in the spring of 22, and it was very wet. But when the tap turned off at the end of June, and we really didn't get any moisture through the fall, so we used up a lot of that moisture. We had decent snow cover, so, we had enough kind of to get seeding, get germination this spring. But I would say the wheat on our farm this year is the worst we've had since 1988.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, well, combine that with the fact that it turned so terribly hot there at the end of May, beginning of June. Wheat really seems to take it on the chin when it turns hot and dry. And so, our wheat, I don't know. We haven't gotten into any of it yet. I think if our wheat will average 35, I'll be pretty happy.
Okay. Now, you mentioned potatoes, and I don't know the percent of expansion that we've seen in southern Alberta on potatoes, but I there's been new entrants, and I know some potato growers that I talk to regularly talk about how they have expanded their acres. Have we seen an expansion in Manitoba, like sort of what we've seen here in Alberta?
I would say maybe not to the same degree. Having said that, Simplot, one of our local we've got basically two processors on the process side, Simplot and McCain. And Simplot did double their factory a number of years ago. So, over the last 5 years, we have seen acres expand in Manitoba. Here, I would say they've kind of leveled off here now in the last year or two. Guys, I think mostly now we're at a situation where there's more land available for potato production, but getting water to it is the issue.
Yeah, no doubt. There's that is if you can't get water to the potatoes, you got a really big problem, especially if you're in an area where, like I am, where it never rains, and where you are, where there definitely has been some challenges. What's the soil type in Carman?
We are straight north of Carman, so north and west of Carman, it's a very light soil type. We mostly call it an Alta sand to a Willowcrest sand, mostly Alta. So obviously it lends itself to potato production very well. Yep. If you would go northeast of Carman, it turns heavy.
That heavy soil would not do well in these dry conditions.
It is not. We don't really farm any heavy land. The furthest east we go is about 2 miles east of the highway. And I say it's heavy. For us, it's heavy. My friends that farm heavy land laugh at me. They say it's not heavy. So,
you think you're heavy? I'll show you heavy.
Yeah, exactly. I have friends that farm closer to the Red River, and they laugh at me. So.
Oh, yeah. So
we're Gunter farms. That's terrible heavy.
Yeah. So all in all, considering real dry bias on the farm there this year, how are things looking now compared to what you thought the year would look like? We've seen the markets bounce all over the place and interest rates doing what they're doing. How are you feeling about 2023?
Oh, I guess short answer, I don't know. I guess if we could put 23 in the books, would be fine with me right now. I think, interest rates, obviously, money's costing more. Our crop production is going to be down. Having said that, Our coverages on crop insurance are good this year, so really allows us to have a not a stellar year, but a decent year, despite the fact that the crop is down. I guess all in all, the whole general area is quite dry. I guess I tend to look at the bright side, onward and upward. If we can get some rain even now in fall, it helps us for next year. We'll live to farm another day, right?
Yeah, as you were talking there, I was thinking of that phrase of live to fight another day. You just try to get through it, and that's kind of, I think what you're kind of describing there. Do you think these rising interest rates, and who knows what the Bank of Canada does next? Do you think that starts to put some steam into some of these land prices, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a very good question. I would say in our area, it hasn't shown any indication of softening at this point. I think land prices will tend to hold the line, at least for the time being. I think, we've had a couple of dry years. Production hasn't been maybe quite at what it could be, but, I think by and large, most farmers are pretty well heeled, have their finances under control so that they can make a move if they need to. I guess it would depend on how long this would carry on. I would say on our own farm, we are probably going to tap the brakes a little bit, on spending. We've probably had 5 or 7 years of potato production that haven't been ideal. So, I would say, we're going to maybe end with it between that and the cost of interest or cost of money.
Yeah.
We're maybe going to, as far as machinery purchases and if the right piece of land comes up, you still want to give her a try. But as far as machinery and I'll say the extras, we'll maybe tap the brakes a bit this year.
Makes sense. Hey, Jason, thanks so much. I know you're super busy here today trying to get some things done. So thanks so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Good luck with harvest, and we'll talk to you a bit later on in the year, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Always good to see you. I'll talk to you.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio with more of the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada right after this.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
And welcome back to the Farmer Rapid Fire here on RealAg Radio, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. And now we go up to Woking, Alberta, up in the Peace, and we're talking to Jesse Meyer. Hey, Jesse, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I ran into you at Ag in Motion, and for those of you that don't know Jesse, he has always a smile from ear to ear, but at that time, you had an even bigger smile because you were saying the crops were looking pretty good. Give us an update how things are looking in your area.
Yeah, we're in really good shape here, Sean. The whole season's been quite nice. We started off really dry, so we started May 1st with seeding, and we went straight through and finished on the 14th of May. Which is really early for us. And it was looking dry at the beginning. We had about 3-4 weeks there where it wasn't looking very good. But then at the end of May, we got a nice rain. And basically, right until now, we've kind of been getting nice showers on a weekly basis. And things are looking really good here on our farm. And, looking good to the south of us here to Grand Prairie as well for the most part. And the east part of the Peace Country is looking good. It gets a bit drier as you move further north in our area, but but for our farm, we really can't complain. We've got a really nice crop coming, especially for our spring wheat and canola.
Yeah. Now we, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but we also need. We're not in the bin yet, right? And you're in an area where, a great harvest is not a sure thing. So you probably get your fingers and your toes crossed here right now that this good season will continue, so you can get this crop off.
No, that's right. Yeah. So it's raining the last 2 days. It's been raining off and on. So yeah, absolutely. Certainly not in the bin yet. And we did actually get some hail here a week, 10 days ago on some of our canola, and it did some significant damage there. So yeah, no, we're still not in the bin yet. Things can happen. Although we're getting close to harvest. So
yeah, how far away?
Yeah, so we actually sprayed off some winter wheat here a few days ago, and we're gonna probably start combining that early to mid next week. And then also some of the peas are getting very close to getting harvested.
Yeah. Well, this is great to hear, Jesse, because, going back a number of years here, we've been chatting with you, and we have had years where we talk about the monsoon and nobody can get in the field. And then we've also talked about how it never rains. So this is actually kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing to talk to you on a year that sounds pretty darn good so far.
Yes, it does. Yeah, no, we're in very good shape.
That's great. So from a crop marketing standpoint, how is that sort of I guess gone as you look out in the field and then look at what's happened with some of the prices and the grain contracts and all that kind of stuff? How have you handled that?
Yeah, so we as a team here, my brother and my sister and I, we talk almost on a daily basis about selling more grain. So we started selling back in already, middle or early last winter for this new crop. And we had some sold even before seeding. And then as we had the crop planted and things were starting to look good, we started selling more. And we have a pretty good amount of crops sold, quite a bit of canola and wheat, a fair bit right off the combine, actually peas as well. So we're sold pretty heavily actually for the 2023 crop here.
Yeah.
And where we wouldn't want to sell a whole lot more. Just there is, as I said, there's still that risk of a storm or something coming through, and yeah, definitely not in the bin yet. But we're pretty heavily sold here for the 23 crop.
So you mentioned that there's a couple different siblings involved. Do you try to build consensus around that plan amongst you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my brother Sammy and I run the farm together here operationally, and then we have an older sister, Tracy, who's based out of Saskatchewan, and she's with a large company involved in the grain business and crop input business. And then we also have another brother in Australia, Stefan, who's in the grain business. And so yeah, we talk quite often. Pretty much we have a chat going, right?
Yeah.
And someone will think that this might be a good opportunity, and we come to an agreement, and usually we sell, and we sell incrementally, right?
Yeah. Well,
that seems to work pretty good.
With one of the brothers in Australia, that chat goes around the clock. That's an active WhatsApp group.
It is. Yep, it's going all the time.
That's good.
It works really good.
Yeah. So as you look at the year, is there something that hasn't necessarily gone like the way that you wanted, equipment or financing wise or operationally, anything like that?
Things have been going good. I mean, now I looked back at the crop, and there's some things we would have done a little differently, right? Now you can see the sclerotinia in the canola, and wish maybe we should have sprayed a few more fields, or we're seeing some insect pressures like the grasshopper, some of the damage that they've done, and looking at that. But those decisions are sometimes hard to make at the time, and it's easy to look back and say what you could have done. But maybe, some of those things, I guess, we learn again, and I guess maybe some of the challenges that we're seeing now.
And you can't beat yourself up too much about it.
No.
You can't live in total hindsight. That's for sure. Well, hey Jesse, thanks so much for joining us. I'm so glad to hear that the crop looks pretty decent out there in your parts. And hey, all the best to you getting out of the field into the bin and having a great year. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sean.
And we finish off the former rapid fire with our sponsor, Pioneer Seeds Canada. And we're talking to Paul Hermans, who's a field agronomist with Pioneer in Richmond, Ontario, out in the eastern part of the province. And Paul, how's it going?
Great, Sean. Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to chat with you. So give us an update. How are the crops looking right there outside of Ottawa?
Well, to me, it's in my area that I cover, it's kind of a tale of two cities, Sean. And you think back to June, we were really dry, but then all of a sudden the tap turned on, and seems to be in July and for part of August here, we just in certain parts can't turn that tap off. So we get a day of sun, maybe two, and then rain, and it's just wet feet syndrome is the big issue. So looking at the crops, corn overall looks pretty good, but beans are the ones that are suffering a lot more with too much water, basically.
Yeah, so the corn is just in a better position to take this amount of moisture that, a good part of Ontario, well, and Quebec's a whole other story, because I think the rainfall has actually been higher in Quebec. Just the corn's able to suck up that moisture a little bit more right now?
Exactly. And yeah, you take a look at, how much available water corn would use in a week compared to beans. And right now corn's a lot higher, kind of more in that 3 inches of available water per week as we get more into that grain field, and then beans is kind of more in that 2 inches, right? You look as well, the differences between the root structure in a corn plant versus a bean plant as well. So I'm seeing a lot more root rot issues this year our way, a lot more yellow plants that in beans are basically running out of oxygen just with too much saturated water. And you can really pick that up driving by, and then, flying with a drone or field walking, using satellite imagery, that kind of stuff, picking it up. But it's definitely the heavier clay soils, the poor drain soils that are going to take it more in the chin this year than other soil types.
Yeah, we were talking to Ethan and Phil earlier here on the show about, soybeans want August moisture, but, a little bit too much of a good thing is always too much. So what are the symptoms that I'm looking for when I'm looking at my soybeans to know we're getting a little bit too waterlogged here?
Well, the biggest thing is just, I would say, plant discoloration. You start getting the tops of the plants, they start to turn that pale yellow, and in some cases they die right off, especially when we're getting some of these root rot symptoms coming in. So more, uniformity of the plant across the field and getting these pockets. And again, a lot of it boils back to lowland areas, low-lying areas with a water and pond, and definitely that heavier clay soil. So for some of the folks that phoned in from Southern Ontario, we get some pretty heavy clay soils down there that can run into the same kind of issues that we're seeing here in Eastern Ontario, especially like you said before, the far east and into Quebec. Some of the highest rainfall events that we've had in history, and we get within Pioneer Agronomy team, we get maps looking at these rainfall amounts and kind of circle these hotspot areas, and Eastern Ontario, Quebec is one of those hotspot areas for sure.
Yeah, if we could pick up some of that moisture in Quebec and take it back to Western Canada, boy, life would be a lot better. It would feel a little bit more equal.
It would be. It's the life of the haves and have-nots, Sean. And I tell you what, if you and I can do that, man, we'd be multimillionaires.
Yeah, somewhere in there, I'm sure as people are listening to the show here, they're telling some political jokes that are attached to all that. But we'll leave that for maybe tomorrow's show. So, Paul, one of the things that I've been hearing, though, is, back to the corn crop is, although there was some concern about dryness earlier on in the season, I continue to hear from Ontario growers, this corn crop, it may be a record breaker. What are you hearing and seeing amongst your agronomy team?
I hear the same thing, Sean. And I guess the big thing is, I'd rather have rain, that 2 weeks before and after tassel is most critical, and especially when we get in the grain field, and then have moisture available. We've got such a large biomass crop right now out there that's just chugging away. The only downfall I see though is we got some, not quite uniform fields out there. We got some different timing and tassel within the same field, so that might play into account. But doing some preliminary kernel counts, length of the cob seems to be a lot longer than normal. So we're setting ourselves up, but we need sun. We're just not getting that solar radiation to help pack that starch in here, and that's what we need for the next 45 days.
Now, is that lengthening out the time to maturity, that lack of sun?
Well, if you look at the research data, tassel to black layer, it's generally a 60 to 65 day period. Take that with a grain of salt. It can be a little bit longer if we start getting cooler and less sun, but in general, it's a calendar thing. So, most of our corn crop in Eastern Ontario by the 25th of July was tasseling, so we should be set up by the 25th of September, a mature crop. Knock on wood, if we get the sun and everything else to help it along here.
So we need that temperature, that sunlight intensity to sort of turn up the dial a little bit here right now is what we need.
Exactly. And it's the sunlight it's the energy that it packs into the plant that takes the sugars basically and converts it into starch and into that kernel weight, especially for corn. That's key in that the final 45-day phase here. So hopefully we're going to get it going forward.
Yeah, no kidding. It's it's really amazing to me how all of this kind of good decisions and bad decisions all kind of stack up and it accumulates through the growing season. I just want to go back 1 second. You'd mentioned that there's some uneven tasseling that is out there in terms of some of the timing. What led to that?
I would go back, and it comes back to planting and uniformity of emergence, and it comes back to planting depth and setting it up, the planter right, and getting it off and making sure that we're in, a little deeper into the zone where we got moisture to get those plants up and going. And I know it's hard because you got differences in fields and stuff, soil types and everything else across the board, but it all comes back to that first roll. You always talk about the biggest deal with seeds when it's in the bag. What do we do afterwards? And some of the sins from the spring are showing up here now.
Yeah, but it was dry though, right? So
exactly, Shaun. But you can, if we have a quarter of an inch difference in depth, it could be enough moisture to germinate or not, right? And a corn seed needs about 30% of its weight in moisture to germinate. So it could be, that quarter inch could be, I got enough moisture or not enough. And I think that's what we're seeing in some cases here, across Ontario and Quebec.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, thanks a lot for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks again to Pioneer Seeds Canada for being the sponsor of the Farmer Rapid Fire.
Appreciate it, Shaun. Thanks.
Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, you don't got to wait for me to call you to update all the audience on what's happening in your fields. You can do that by sending me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.